Truth is, Joe Biden only started pushing back on left-wing extremists in his party when his side started losing at the polls. Joining me now is Florida Congressman and member of both the House Judiciary and Armed Services Committees, Matt Gaetz. Hey, Congressman, great to see you, sir. Joe Biden tried to erase years of Democrat attacks on cops in one speech. His side didn't buy it. Rashida Tlaib was out the very same night pushing the squad's anti-cop message. Should the rest of America believe that Joe Biden's party is all of a sudden pro-cop?
No. Democrats know that this issue is toxic for them, with a lot of suburban women who decide key midterm elections. And that's why Joe Biden is trying to inoculate against a record that is very discernible. Let me let everybody in on the secret. In Washington today, defund the police has morphed into disarm and dismantle the police. You see, Democrats envision policing where the cop never gets out of the car when you call. That's why they want to take away their immunities. That's why they want to limit the tools that law enforcement has in responding to a threat situation. It's why they want to limit our ability to decommission body armor from the military and ensure that it's available for maybe economically disadvantaged law enforcement units across our country. And the proof that their strategy is negatively impacting Americans is seen in the high number of retirements, the reductions in budgets all over America. You have the Biden administration, you have Washington Democrats in the squad gaslighting Democrat-led cities where, frankly, there are a lot of good Americans who still live in Democrat-run states and Democrat-run cities, and they deserve to have the police show up when they call. And, I was the criminal justice chairman in the Florida House of Representatives, spent a lot of time with sheriffs, police chiefs, law enforcement. They believe in proactive policing, where you can limit the acuity of violence or criminal conduct by getting out of that car, by resolving a situation, by de-escalating it. And they want a circumstance where you have to fend for yourself. And oh, by the way, while they're doing it, they're trying to take our guns away. That is really the double whammy that hurts American safety.
Absolutely. And the other big element of proof that I'm seeing is the massive crime wave, Congressman, that has gripped Democrat-run cities, the entire country, that is, of course, the American people suffer because of that. Now, as you know, Biden and his party declared a war on American energy producers using their fake religion and unproven science of man-made global warming. Once again, America is a slave to foreign oil countries who really hate us at the end of the day. One of those countries, of course, is Vladimir Putin's Russia. Yet when the House put forward the American Energy Independence from Russia Act, you were the lone Republican who said no to that. Why is that?
Yeah, I think both the Democrats and the Republicans had misguided drafting on this issue. The Republican response to the Democrats actually undid Trump-era executive orders that protected sensitive military testing from oil and gas leasing. There are a few areas in the world that are the only areas where we have live fire testing of missiles. We should not be having new oil and gas leasing in those areas. President Trump understood that. He issued an executive order that this, I think, well-intentioned legislation inartfully would have overtaken. I've strongly supported the expansion of the Keystone Pipeline, the continued work there. I do believe that the natural resources work in the Congress should actually benefit the production of natural resources, but I wasn't a big fan of the Republican response.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of not being able to control our own destiny. If President Trump were in office, if the oil supply was tight as it is now, we would be able to increase production and save our citizens from all the pain. But now we're at the mercy of some of the biggest thugs on the planet, all because of Mr. Biden. Congressman, Twitter despises, as you well know, America First leaders, President Trump, for example. They banned him. But despots, dictators, and thugs responsible for the slaughter of tens of thousands of people on this planet, they're allowed to go onto Twitter. And people have asked why the Kremlin's official page is still up on Twitter. I say it was because, well, the GOP, when they had majorities in 2016, they fiddled while Rome burned. Am I wrong there? And doesn't the GOP leadership need to change if Section 230 isn't reformed to bring up accountability and the censorship on these platforms?
I don't think that reforms to Section 230 go far enough. I'm one of the Republicans who's actually sponsored bipartisan legislation not to regulate big tech, but to break up big tech. We should never live in a world where the terms of service on Twitter are more important than the values that undergird our Constitution. So I'm for the Kremlin being on Twitter. I'm for the Taliban being on Twitter. But I got to be honest with you, Twitter's not really fun anymore without Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene. That was like 50% of the fun on all of Twitter. And so I think increasingly, as they drive people onto alternative platforms like Getter, like Rumble, that are really embracing free speech, Truth Social, really ramping up very quickly right now, very effectively, I think that Twitter will become obsolete by their own hand, because the trend lines right now are more oppressive, more really repugnant to the values of free speech, and it's getting worse every day.
Yeah, I despise governments, and I despise companies. I despise platforms that censor free speech. That's just me as an American. Congressman, Biden's State of the Union was, as you know, tone deaf, out of touch, incoherent, full of lies, botched lines left and right. I mean, the guy mixed up Ukraine and Iran, for crying out loud. But as the night wore on and Biden didn't mention our troops that he needlessly killed in Afghanistan or the Americans he left behind, some of your colleagues, Congresswomen Boebert and Green, they made sure those Americans were not forgotten, and they had an emotional outburst. The DNC, the so-called Party of Women, called both of these Congresswomen, Boebert and Green, quote, trash. What's your reaction, Congressman?
Well, that was less a State of the Union and more state of denial from Joe Biden. I think that the big miss for him was not recognizing that more government spending is not the kryptonite to inflation. More government spending causes inflation. And by the way, it wasn't all that unique that Boebert and Green got up and started hollering during the State of the Union. They do that most days on the floor of the House of Representatives when they feel an appropriate and, frankly, most of the time justified need to call out the corruption and the bad acts that we see in both parties. So I stand with these brave women of my party. They are very effective members of Congress, and that's why the DNC calls them trash. You see, the DNC or the RNC can't control Boebert and Green. They actually fight for their constituents. I saw Lauren Boebert post on Twitter that she's heard that there actually are family members of some of the 13 fallen who appreciate that at least someone stood up for them and let them know that they weren't forgotten.
Wow. Wow, Matt Gaetz, a man standing up for women, and the DNC trashing women. Wow, who could have seen that coming?
How about that?
Matt Gaetz, thank you very much, Congressman. Always great to talk with you, sir.